Hey, this is Ed. Real quick before we get started. If you follow me on social media, you may have seen that I set up a few options for listeners to become supporters of the podcast. You can go to mountainandprairie.com/support to learn more. But I did want to take a quick moment to thank some of the amazingly generous folks who were the first ones to jump on board and start to support the podcast with their hard-earned dollars. And those folks are Matt Hansen, Seb Saul, Jade Antoine, Palinor Velasco, Jill Baylor, Andrea Hyde, the Rocky Mountain Land Library, Amanda Mansfield, Carly Lewis, Emily Lewis, Amanda Bell, Riley Rush, and Danny Vergés. So thank you so much. I can't thank these generous folks enough for the support. I was amazed when people listen to the podcast. You can only imagine how amazed I am when people start supporting the podcast financially. I really, really appreciate it. And I also really appreciate everyone who listens. The podcast is free. It always will be free. No pressure to donate. But if you are so inclined, go to mountainandprairie.com/support to learn more. Thanks a lot. Hey, this is Ed Robertson, and this is the Mountain and Prairie Podcast, where I introduce you to some of the innovative individuals who are shaping the future of the American West. I meet most of these people through my work in land conservation or through my hobbies and interests that revolve around spending time up high in the mountains. My guests include ranchers, writers, entrepreneurs, conservationists, athletes, artists, adventurers, pretty much anyone who's doing important work, has an interesting story, and loves the American West. My guest today is Juanita Vero. Juanita is a partner at the Ebarl Ranch, a family-owned dude ranch located on the Blackfoot River, about an hour north of Missoula, Montana. The ranch was purchased and founded by Juanita's great-grandfather and has served as a Rocky Mountain retreat for families from around the world for almost 100 years. If you've never visited but would like to learn more about the ranch, this conversation with Juanita is one of your only options. They don't have a website, nor do they advertise. They serve the same clients year after year, clients who value an authentic, rustic, and tight-knit dude ranching experience that's closely connected to the land. But the term dude ranch doesn't really do the Ebarl justice. Juanita's family has participated in some cutting-edge conservation projects, protecting their ranch with a unique conservation easement that also allows for responsible timber management. Becoming a member of the ranch's summer staff is also an amazing experience, and it's not uncommon for staff members to develop such a deep love of the land that they go on to careers in ranching or conservation. Juanita and her family lead by example with their business management and land stewardship practices, which seem to rub off on everyone who visits or works at the ranch. Juanita and I connected just as she was wrapping up another successful summer season on the ranch. We had a fun conversation that covered everything from her great-grandfather's purchase of the ranch in the early 1900s all the way up to its present-day operations. We talk in detail about Juanita's commitment to community service, and we dig into some of her work with groups such as Trout Unlimited, Montana Conservation Voters, and the Blackfoot Challenge. We also discuss her youth on the ranch and what she learned from leaving Montana in her teens to go attend East Coast boarding school. We talk about toughness, the interesting story of how her parents met, and her blind date with her now husband, which happened to be a 3-day elk hunt. And as usual, we cover favorite books, films, places in the West, and more. This was a great conversation, so I know you'll enjoy it. Thanks again for listening. When you meet somebody for the first time and introduce yourself and they ask you that question, what do you do? How do you answer that?
I like to say my family has a dude ranch.
And then I'm sure that opens it up to about 50 new questions.
Right. And then they're like, well, dude ranch. And I waffled for a while. Is it guest ranch? Is it dude ranch? And I'm really just fine with dude ranch. And then to describe it, I often say it's City Slickers meets Dirty Dancing with a little river runs through it, Horse Whisper, and some Downton Abbey.
Those are some quality movies.
But then I'm finding out that, you get to a certain age and people might not know what you're talking about. So, I'll I kind of have to see it. A lot of people really haven't seen Dirty Dancing, or City Slickers.
Anybody who doesn't know every Swayze reference should be immediately ejected from the ranch. Um, so tell me, can you talk a little bit about the history of the ranch? Because it's amazing how far it goes back. How did you end up there? How did your family end up there?
Yeah, I was dumb luck. I was born, so very, very fortunate. But my great grandparents started it in the early 20s is when it became like a proper business. But the land was purchased by my great grandfather in 1906.
Oh wow!
And yeah, this is probably a winter project, but from apparently 4 homesteaders, and I don't know how or why they sold to him, or did they do it all together, or I don't know the details about that purchase or how he came to own it. I do know that he couldn't afford to buy it all by himself, so he had the help of his father and 3 sisters, and so he named the ranch the El Ranch in honor of his 3 sisters, Eleanor, Dorothy, and Elizabeth. Mm-hmm. And this is a Chicago family, so I'm gonna have to backtrack a bit. He had gone to MIT and then wanted to be on the railroad and work out west and go west, and so he was an engineer and surveyor, and so building tracks from Chicago to Seattle is how he came to Montana. And then in Montana, in Missoula and then up the Blackfoot, he knew this area because there were some spur roads that were being built, spur logging roads. And so he could kind of see the landscape in the area. And then he continued on to Seattle, which is where he met my great-grandmother, who was a student at the University of Washington. Okay. And she had come down from Alaska. Her father was a superintendent of a silver mine up there. And so they met there. And then, you did ask about this, whether or not my great-grandfather married her on a bet, but actually it was her who married him on a bet.
Oh, really?
The oral tradition goes that she was from this lower class Alaska, whatever, upbringing, and he was from Chicago money, and apparently her friends thought she couldn't land him, sort of thing. Again, this is the story.
Yeah.
I was too young to actually confirm any of this. I knew her. She taught me to walk. I live in her cabin now. I have fond memories of her, but I wasn't old enough to have these conversations with her.
Sure. That's wild.
Yeah.
So what do you think drove him to head out that way? Obviously he had the job that took him, but he could, with going to MIT, he could have easily probably gotten a ton of different jobs anywhere. Why do you think he wanted to go west?
That's funny. I think he also asked her at the time, does she want to go to Montana or Mesopotamia? And I think there's a lot of rail construction happening in the Middle East. And so he had an opportunity to go. I could have been born in Iraq, Iran, who knows?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of interesting to think about. But they decided to try Montana. And I think it was because that whole westward expansion, that was like a thing. Like the West was opening up.
Yep.
And Easterners wanted to come west and explore the country. And now there's a way to get out here. My gosh, people, when our first guests, they would take the train from back east, and they would spend the entire summer or a good portion of the summer out here. And I think, this is when a lot of the old guest ranches got started. It was about around this time. So, but it was more accidental of them starting the guest ranch. But why he wanted to come west? Why anyone wants to come west?
Yeah, adventure,
opportunity. It's beautiful. The climate's agreeable. Clean water, clean air.
Yeah, the whole reason I came out. It's as old as the Europeans who settled here. It's kind of the same then as it is now. Everybody just beauty, opportunity, the whole deal. So they opened it up for guests, you said, in the 20s, and you've been doing that every summer since?
Yeah, so they got out. So 1906 it was purchased. His mother, so that would have been my great great grandmother, was sick in Chicago, and apparently had been told that she needed to be out in the drier climate. I don't know what she had, but some sort of respiratory issue. But and so I think that may have helped him, my great grandfather, come out here. But I'm sorry, I got distracted by that. But what? And then then World War I happened.
Yep.
So they weren't. I don't think they really had a plan for the property in those years during the war. I mean, so my grandfather was in Europe. We, had lost the brand. The original brand was the El Dor-El Ranch, but and the brand was E Bar L, but then he couldn't re-register the brand because he was gone, and so we lost the brand. So the brand that we use now is actually E/L, but we still call ourselves E Bar L.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's actually an E Bar L somewhere in southwestern Montana. Yeah, so it became a guest ranch, I think, after the war, because, I mean, he had friends and now he had contacts and people back east, whether it's MIT or the war, that wanted to come west. And he had some property out here, so they came out. And then my great-grandmother probably got tired of taking care of them. And after about 7 years or so of that, she was like, your friends are going to help pay. And I think we rented some horses and, hired a cook, and it kind of became, what it is now.
And so fast forward to this summer, 2018, and like you're very low key, there's no website, very little info online, which I think is super cool, but you guys have been going strong with it for coming up on 100 years. So who are your guests? I mean, not specific names, but what kind of folks come to visit? Are they people that come, the same people that come year after year after year, or how does that work?
Yeah, so we don't do any advertising. We kind of feel that word of mouth works best. I mean, we're not for everyone. This is this kind of messy sort of, you're part of the family, whether you want to be or not. And if not, if that's not the experience you want, then we're not the right place for you. And, you sleep in a single bed, and we don't charge extra for the bats or the mice that might visit you in that single bed. and it's, I mean, the staff don't wear name tags, but they know how you want your eggs in the morning, and you're expected to unsaddle your horse, and it's a different sort of experience, but the kind of the guests that we have, that, yes, you're right, there are people that have been coming, my gosh, since the 40s. I mean, Will is marrying a woman whose family has been involved with the ranch since the 1940s.
And for people who don't know, that's a mutual friend that we have that I met through ranch brokerage, and worked at Juanita's ranch, and turns out we have that guy in common, which is pretty cool.
So funny. So most of our guests are from the coast. I mean, from New England, Southeast, and then California and Europe, or mainly England. And I think that's just because it's just a function of this word of mouth in the same social circles, and you have to have enough money, obviously, to get your family, in a plane and fly into Missoula, which is not cheap to fly into, and then spend a week out here, So, I think it's just that, we don't have people from Montana that want to come here, really, because it's people from Montana can already do Montana, So who our guests are? I mean, they're famous people and not famous people, and it just doesn't really matter when you're here on the ranch who you are or what you do. you're really kind of judged. Judged is a strong word, but I mean, people see you for who you are on the ranch, and that's just that. Yeah, that's how we see you, and that's how you're treated, and how, you're expected to take care of your horse and be a pleasant person around the campfire and at the dinner table and on the softball field and floating down the river and at the skeet range. And no one really cares too much about what you do as a day job.
So that sounds awesome, and it sounds like the exact kind of place I would want to spend time. But I would imagine that you've had a few people show up who maybe didn't understand what they were getting into. Are there any funny stories, without naming names, of somebody who showed up and left abruptly because they didn't like the single bed or something like that?
Yeah, single bed and no air conditioning. There. I mean, the single bed and no air conditioning. A couple of folks from Arizona, actually, that had heard of the ranch through other people. So they came not knowing anyone. They didn't have children with them, so they weren't kind of forced to get into all the activities they could, and this just wasn't for them. Again, there was no air conditioning in their cabins. It was warm out. They weren't super active. And they left midway through their stay, and that was totally fine. No hard feelings.
Self-selection. That's good.
That's really what it is. It's self-selection, because to come to the ranch, someone has to kind of recommend it to you. We want to know how you found out, who you heard about the ranch from.
Yep.
And then that person's name is on the line. So we just kind of let people take care of that themselves. And then for the most part, I mean, if there's really someone that doesn't seem to fit in well here, we're just not available for them in the future. But most of the time, really, it's just they self-select. It's pretty simple. We've never had to say someone needs to leave the ranch. I mean, we're pretty lucky.
That takes a lot of, obviously a lot of years, and a lot of hard work to be able to build up a client base like that and reputation. And you just think about family businesses in general. I took a class one time about them, and it was something like 95% of them are done by the third generation. And so, you take any family business is challenging, and then a family business that involves ranching and a kind of a harsh landscape and some possibly persnickety customers. I mean, that's quite an accomplishment that y'all have built that up to where it is. So growing up there, when you were a kid, I'm curious about when these Easterners would come in, especially like kids your age that would be there with their parents. What did you think about those kids? Because obviously they weren't as tough as you, or rarely were they as tough as you. They didn't know anything about horse. Like all the stuff that kind of made up your daily life was completely foreign to probably a lot of these kids. I mean, what did you think about those kids?
Yeah, but it's interesting because the things that they knew, I knew nothing about. I had no pop culture. I didn't understand music or gadgets or clothes or style or any of that. And so they were kind of foreign to me, but at the same time, really sparkly in the sense that I was drawn to the kids that I knew in the summer more than to the kids that I went to this little one-room schoolhouse down the road. I mean, I could ride my horse there. I mean, my mom would do training runs with her sled dogs there.
Really?
It was. It's a little one-room schoolhouse, kindergarten through 8th grade. We had maybe 10 kids at the most when I was there. It's still functioning. It's great, but the kids that I knew there didn't necessarily inspire me the same way that the kids inspired me here on the ranch. But on the ranch, I was also responsible for their safety and responsible for hosting them. I mean, I started taking rides when I was, 14.
Like by yourself with the customers?
Yeah, by myself with a bunch of. I mean, now looking back, it's kind of laughable, but I was expected to take the kids out. I mean, so these are kids, 6, 7, 8, and we didn't have too many little ones, but 8 was probably the youngest. To up to 12, I would take those kids out. I would be responsible for them for 4 hours, and no one knew where I was going, and it was just that I needed to show them a good time for 4 hours and be back in time for lunch. It's not like we didn't have cell phones. We didn't check in, and it's wild, but it didn't occur to me that I was doing anything abnormal. I mean, this was expected of me, and I was there to keep them safe, show them how to ride, and make it a pleasant experience so that they would come back. It wasn't so you come back and be a customer. It's a pleasant experience because these are people that we like, and so you're showing off your home and Montana to them.
How many acres is the ranch total?
Oh, we have 4,000, and then we lease another 4,000, so about 8,000 that we get to play on.
That's awesome. And the Blackfoot River goes right through the middle of it? Goes right through it. I mean, it's fantastic. And it's really fantastic riding country because, it's not the crazy mountains like Glacier National Park where you have to kind of struggle through. I mean, it's accessible by horse, and that you can move through it. You can run through the forests. You can climb the mountains, and it's mountains and forest and prairie and river and open fields, and it's a diverse landscape. I mean, in the week that the guests are here, for the most part, they really don't ride to the same place twice. I mean, that's funny. We don't really talk about it with the Wranglers. We just kind of feel our way, and they don't repeat areas. It's pretty cool. That's really cool. And so while we're talking about the ranch, I understand that you guys conserved the ranch years back with the Nature Conservancy. Is that correct?
Yeah, in the late 90s, my grandfather was able to put a conservation easement on it with the Nature Conservancy. And that's fantastic. So what that just essentially means is that it can never be subdivided it can never be subdivided and sold off in small chunks.
So what was the thought process behind that? What led you guys to do that? Because, obviously that's what I do all day long, but there's pros and cons to it. So I'd love to hear. And that was relatively early in the, in the easement world. And so what led y'all to do that?
I think, it's planning. I mean, because he gets a income tax break too, but at the same time, just trying to plan for the future. I mean, I'm grateful for it. I know that some people would see it like, oh, I can't believe your grandfather did that, and now he's taking away the opportunity for his children or his grandchildren to be able to sell the ranch or get any money out of it or whatever. But that wasn't my grandfather's priority. Like his vision for the ranch was to return it to what it was in the 1880s, prior to when, white settlers were in the area. So in order to achieve that vision, the conservation easement allowed him to kind of work towards that. And he knew that he was going to be dead before he'd see that. And so that's just kind of how I grew up. And so I was grateful for that, that this was the plan, and this is what we all kind of bought into. I don't have children, and I don't plan on it. And so I think a conservation easement, is fantastic if you guys are all on the same page. When it gets tricky, like you said, it's like third, fourth generation down there. And it's the spouses and like their family. And people get farther and farther away from that initial vision. Things can get messy, but what I love about the conservation easement is it's for perpetuity. So it doesn't matter who I marry or who my offspring or who, it just, that my grandfather's vision will be protected, and that, I take, great comfort in that.
Yeah. I think just thinking about it from a family business perspective, not even from an ecological conservation side of things, but by putting that in under easement and then there not being the option to subdivide it, that option is off the table. So it's not even a topic of discussion, like say some, generations from now would get in their head, well, we ought to develop this thing. That's not even an option now, which is probably helps avoid any sort of conflicts among family members, I would guess, down the road.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, that's great. And so sorry for people listening who may not be all that interested in the nitty gritty, but I am. And so the easement allow for timber harvesting, selective responsible timber harvesting? Is that correct?
It does. And conservation easements are different, and ours was earlier and maybe a little more prescriptive than more current easements are. There's a recipe essentially for how the land needs to be managed. It's kind of like this idea of a three-legged stool, like to work closely with the University of Montana School of Forestry, and then the ranch and the land that was my grandfather's, and so, and the Nature Conservancy, obviously, and so, yeah, the idea is, so we have a lot of, I guess people have to look up on a map. We're in western Montana, Missoula County, and so it's timbered, mainly, fir and ponderosa. And what happened is in the, oh my gosh, I think it was the 70s, late 60s, there was a big pine beetle kill. And so my grandfather was trying to figure out how to take care of it, how to address it. And so he kind of retrofitted his farming equipment to make it usable in the woods. And so he could start cutting, and then he ended up getting closer with the University of Montana School of Forestry and trying to figure out ways that he could make his forest more resilient to pine beetle infestation. And so then he was doing this idea of like sustainable forestry for actually until the end of his life, for the last 30 some odd years of his life, 30, 40 years of his life. And that's by cutting and at the same time, but having uneven age stands, so that, and then again, he was really afraid of fire. Mm-hmm. I know, because fire can't be controlled, and so we don't use fire. We're probably going to now that he's dead and gone. Yeah. But while he was alive, we did not use fire as a management tool. Although this landscape, evolved with fire and needs fire, but he would do his logging as if fire had gone through the landscape. So it was pretty labor intensive, but he had family members, so he don't have to pay them. And and so that was in the 80s, 90s, was when kind of the heyday of his timber work was.
That's really cool, because I feel like it'd be one thing if you or I came up with an idea like that, but for a guy of his generation to come up with that and implement it kind of ahead of the curve and think about things, in a different manner like that, to come up with solutions, I think that's very admirable, because I would imagine that was what did the neighbors or the surrounding landowners think of what y'all are doing? Have you heard any stories about that?
Oh, it's pretty great. I mean, there's a lot of demonstration projects on the ranch, and there's some long-term studies, that are still happening that the School of Forestry is doing on the ranch. Has I don't even know how many acres. Let's see here, maybe 100, maybe 60 acres. Where it's divided into three sections, and one section you're just kind of like leaving everything. One section you're cutting, and one section you're cutting and using fire. And over the years, now this is like a 40-year project, and you can kind of go through all three areas and just see the difference. And it's pretty impressive, because the area that has just been left alone, the trees are all growing close together. It's hard to get through. It's really dark. The quality of the trees aren't so great. A lot of junk on the ground. Kind of the middle section is was a little better, but the best is where there was active management and fire. And so that's dramatic to see.
Are there any books that you've read over the years about land management? I mean, not like, super specific textbook things, but just you mentioned the thing about fire being a part of the evolutionary, aspect of the landscape. Are there any books that come to mind that were kind of influential in your thinking about land management?
I was an English and gender studies major, so no, I did no civic culture for me.
Well, see, that's the thing is people like me who grew up in North Carolina sit there and read books about it a day. You were living it on a daily basis, so you don't need to read any books about it.
Yeah. Oh man, no, I haven't read anything. I know that. Yeah, no, it's folks come out here and do demonstration projects and lots of field tours.
Well, they're the ones writing the book, so you're just getting firsthand knowledge. You don't need to read the book. You got the authors showing up at your ranch.
Yeah, and I'm sorry. Nope, I have nothing there.
No, that's fine. That's a good answer. So talk about your parents. I know there's a interesting story of how they came together and how you came to be. What's the story there?
So yeah, my dad's Filipino, but he was born here in the States in Sacramento Valley, and he had gone to Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, which was at the time where we were getting a lot of our Wranglers. So he had an associate of his at school, like in the parking lot, was like, "What are you doing for the summer? Want to come to Montana? There's lots of horses, lots of women." And my dad was like, "Okay." So he came out in 1965 and was hired on at summer help and fell in love with the boss's daughter. And that's that. My mom is like this 5'9", striking, strong, dark-haired woman with these crazy ice blue eyes and a very strong jaw. And my dad's this 5'4", 5'5", very happy, smiley Filipino cowboy. They're a funny-looking couple, but so they met here. I mean, he tells the story is that it's spring roundup and they're up on top of the mountain and they're going to bring in the herd of horses and there's like 100 horses they have to bring in, maybe closer to 80, and my grandfather tells my dad to follow my mom because she knows where she's going and follow my mom. And so here he is like, I'm just going to follow this 18-year-old girl. So he thinks it's kind of silly. And so they're out looking for bands of horses and they start collecting them. And she gives out this banshee yell to like get the herd moving off the mountain. I mean, we're talking like, 700 acres that they got to cover and move horses through. And so she gives this scream to like get the horses moving. And he's terrified. I mean, it's taken like, half the morning to get up to the top of the mountain where they're going. And it takes them like 7 minutes to get down to the bottom. I mean, he's ridden through like the rolling hills of California. He's never ridden through timber. And this is like full out, man from Snowy River stuff. And, so, I mean, to have him tell the story, I mean, it's fantastic. But yeah, he likes to say that he was in love after that.
And so it's you, and do you have a brother? Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. I have a younger brother who's a Black Hawk helicopter pilot for the Army.
Is he really?
And yeah, he's down. He splits his time between Fort Hood or Killeen, Texas, and Savannah, Georgia.
That's pretty badass. Has he been deployed a lot?
Oh yeah, he just got back from 4 months in Afghanistan, and I mean he's in Afghanistan 3 tours and Iraq 4, and he's missed out on half his kid's life, and but I think he's wired a certain way to. I feel his humanity is intact, and he's healthy, and he loves what he does, and even better, I think even a greater compliment is that people love to fly with him. They feel safe with him, and that's so great to hear.
Yeah, that's the ultimate compliment when, in any time if people say stuff like that, but when the stakes are that high, that's great. So when you were coming up, you're obviously tough as nails. He's tough as nails. You were growing. Y'all are both exponentially tougher than I ever dream of being. Did your parents try to train that into you specifically, or did it just kind of come from your daily life there on the ranch, or was it a combination of both?
That's really interesting. I think I feel lucky is that we were able to kind of talk about that. I think growing up, this is my mother's family's ranch. My dad was kind of, an outsider for a long time. Like their marriage wasn't something that was approved of. Mm-hmm. My dad's a fantastic human being. And I mean, he eventually won, my grandparents over, but I mean, things were hard in the late 60s, early 70s. And my mom likes to say that my mom marrying my dad gave her mother the courage, if you will, to actually divorce my grandfather and run off with someone that she wanted to marry. So things were a little wild here on the ranch in the early 70s. But my dad, he came from a very large family, didn't have any money, had nothing material to offer other than just being an exemplary human being, and so he kind of lived the example of who one should be. My mom definitely kind of told us how we should be.
Yeah.
She was more the disciplinarian, just more stern. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, my dad didn't have anything really growing up, but it was a very grateful, happy human being. My mom pretty much had everything, and she is what am I trying to say? Not as happy.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Not as trusting. Maybe always is thinking that she doesn't have enough, or
Sure.
that someone's going to pull something over on her, or is jealous, or what have you.
Yeah.
But also a very strong, capable woman. And so I think growing up, she instilled that in both me and my brothers. I mean, and I don't know how. I mean, other than if there were children around us that were behaving in a way that she did not approve of, she would point that out.
Really?
Yeah. And things that were admired were that self-reliance, not whining, being capable, and I think I was like kind of a humorless kid. I was pretty serious. And I think I kind of got that from my mom. I didn't really I wasn't an unhappy kid, but I didn't really tap into joy, I think, until I was in high school and then fully in college when I would really start to think about it. But, things like games and Spirit Week and that sort of stuff in high school. I was just talking about this with a staff member the other day. That was something, the school was something to be serious in, and people dressing up in costumes and being silly for Spirit Week, I couldn't understand. And I would get very eye-rolly over that. But I think we had to be responsible for things. We had dogs and horses, and then we had people to be responsible for. And I think kids don't get that opportunity at a young age these days. And so I think that was really different. And we had space. We had so much physical space to get hurt in. And you could drown in the river. Horses did fall on you, buck you off, run you through stuff. I mean, there were physical consequences to our decisions that I don't think kids get these days.
Yeah, kids or grown-ups. I mean, that's why I think, a lot of, I don't know, whenever I could do something hard or dangerous, like go on a climbing trip or something, when I get back, it's almost kind of depressing because you're like, oh, I got to pay my cell phone bill when, 3 days ago my only goal was don't die.
Right.
I mean, it's just a different level. And the fact that you were getting to, the stakes were relatively high every day. And there was that purpose and that responsibility of, people or animals would die without your help. I mean, that gives you that's a different mindset, even with no training or encouragement from your parents. But it sounds like your mom was still on top of you and reinforcing that toughness. That's cool. I have 2 little girls, and so one of the things I want for them is to be tough, and so that's why I ask. So that's good info.
Yeah, and it really is just. I mean, I think this is what's so great about being a woman is that you can be everything, and that's kind of what my mom kind of expected of us. Like, you need to be able to change a tire in a cocktail dress. It's what she told us, And this is great. I need to have this conversation with my brother, like what sort of rules to live by to grow up to be a man. I don't know what she told him specifically, but I think my parents just modeled how they wanted to be. And they gave us a lot of freedom. I don't think my mom didn't have a lot of freedom with her parents. She always felt she couldn't make her own decisions, and she was never good enough for doing the right thing for either of her parents. And I think that was hard on her.
Yeah.
Very capable, very, very talented woman, but never felt her parents' approval, I think, is kind of what we're seeing now.
Yeah. Humans are interesting animals. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
So one thing you and I have in common is we both went to boarding school, and I think it sounds like you had a great experience. I had a great experience. Can you just talk briefly about showing up, what led you to go to boarding school, and then how was that transition going from a ranch in Montana to East Coast boarding school scene?
Yeah, I think this is kind of a tradition in the West, is to send kids back east for school because they didn't have those sort of opportunities in the West. And so I think it was pretty normal back in the day. But then in my case, I mean, my mom went to boarding school, but more of a finishing school, if you will, so that how she tells it was that so that she would marry well. And then she didn't marry the way that her parents wanted her to marry. But and then I went away. Again, how I told you, like, I was kind of inspired or attracted to the kids that would come here to the ranch. They all went to boarding school, so that's kind of what seemed normal to me. Yeah. The idea of regular public high school was something you'd like see on TV, and it was kind of foreign to me in a sense, because a lot of the kids that I went to grade school with, they didn't always finish high school. And so I had a weird, I just kind of always in my head thought I was going to go to boarding school. And so then, sorry about that.
No, that's right.
But so I'd applied to a bunch of girls' schools, and then by the time, you get in, you apply in the fall and you get in March or whatever. And I applied to one co-ed school because a friend of mine from the ranch had gone there. And by the time March rolls around, I definitely knew that I wanted to go to a co-ed school. I had spent my freshman year at a public high school in Missoula, which was an hour and 15-minute bus ride one way.
Wow. So
I could never be part of the school. I could never be part of anything. It was great. I'm still friends with some of my friends from that time. But I was going from like a school of 10 kids literally to 1,000, and it was a wild experience. I had anxiety about changing classrooms and just watching that clock for the bell to go off, and then you have to get out of that classroom and go into those hallways with all those kids. Oh my God. That's stressful. So boarding school, Connecticut is where I ended up at the Taft School, and I loved it. I think I'm loving it more now looking back than maybe I was at the time.
Yeah.
Because, you're in high school, you're a teenager, you don't know anything. I did not fit in. I didn't look like any of the blonde J. Crew models that, were there. I didn't know how to dress myself. Fortunately, I had a roommate from Long Island who was about my size, so she dressed me.
Nice.
And yeah, it was a very different world. I didn't have a place in the Hamptons. I didn't spend time in Bermuda. I didn't ski in Vail or Europe or what. I mean, we didn't do family vacation. I mean, it was just a completely different world. And so that was different, but at the same time, I think I was secure enough with myself growing up on the ranch and having to be responsible for myself and for others. I mean, I felt pretty okay with myself to be there. And even if it was socially a little awkward. But I loved it. I have great friends there. And then, I mean, our school motto is like, non ut sibi ministratur sed ut ministret, which is not to be served, but to serve. And again, it didn't really sink into me at the time, but years later, now that definitely means a lot to me. And service means a lot to me. And so, I think the seed was planted, unknowingly when I was a sophomore in high school that service is important.
Well, that brings me to this whole page I have. So I got some notes here. I got a lot of notes on one page and then a whole other page that is just your service activities. So you do Montana Conservation Voters, Trout Unlimited, Swan Valley Connection, Sunset School Board, Missoula County Open Lands Committee. I mean, it goes on and on and on. So where do you trace that back? I mean, is that where it comes from your boarding school experience, this desire to serve and be a community leader?
Maybe secondary, but I think the first desire is just looking out for the ranch. I mean, it's purely selfish.
Yeah.
I mean, really, here on the ranch, like where the ranch offers people like this experience it's the state of mind that is Montana.
Yeah.
You just say the word Montana, or even look at the word Montana, it conjures up all the feelings, for me at least, of what Montana can be. Like those the big M's, like the peaks and the mountains, and the O's of like the rivers and the plains, and like just the sound of the word conjures up to me like all that Montana is and can be. Just opportunity, and space, and then selfishly on the ranch, like we live right here on the Blackfoot, and for people to come visit the ranch and want to spend money to be out here and have this experience, we need clean air, clean water, intact habitat, these species, this space, and this kind of idea, and this myth, if you will. Like I know you had asked, like, what's the biggest myth about the American West, and I'm really struggling to. I don't know. I couldn't answer that because I'm so like I've bought into the myth, hook, line, and sinker, and I'm selling it. So
yeah.
I want to provide that. Yeah.
Well, I think you're going against one of the biggest myths, though. I mean, this whole idea, the rugged individualism, that everybody can come out here and have your own little piece of land and do whatever the hell you want and not pay attention to anybody else. Whereas I feel like you're the exact opposite of that. Like you're a community builder, and you've identified these causes that are important to you personally, but I think a lot of other people, it's important to them too. And so people are collaborating, which, you talk to that kind of goes against the classic individualist, I'm going to do my own thing myth. Do you agree with that?
Right. Yeah, I do. And then I'm also like, I'm a product of the Blackfoot Valley. And so like our watershed it's a watershed group called the Blackfoot Challenge, which it spun out of our local Trout Unlimited chapters kind of initial efforts. And then it got bigger than the mission of Trout Unlimited. So folks were, I'm going to have to back up here. I'm sorry. So in the early 70s, there was a earthen dam, mining tailings dam that failed at the headwaters of the Blackfoot. So there was 100,000 tons of toxic sludge that went down the Blackfoot and had a major fish kill. And so then in like by the time the 80s came around, like the fishery was in decline. I mean, here was this hallowed Blackfoot River. Norman McLean's river runs through it. Blackfoot River was no longer the iconic fishery, or it wasn't healthy. And actually, this is a funny story. One of our guests here was from Chicago, and he was an avid fly fisherman, loved fishing. Fish, Wildlife, and Parks didn't have the funds to do a proper baseline study on the Blackfoot. And so there's all this hand-wringing about how they're even going to go about addressing the issue. And this guy, Mud McNulty, asked how much the study would cost, $15,000. And he wrote a check and said, get the study done.
That's awesome.
And it was just so cool and this sort of stuff has kind of happened with guests on the ranch have really stepped up and helped because they care so much about this place, this region. So he kind of helped jumpstart, if you will, some of the early conservation efforts on the river. And then there was also in the 80s and 90s, there's threat of gold mines. There's always going to be a threat of gold mines going in the Blackfoot and the headwaters. And so, again, folks were trying to figure out how to deal with impacts of mining, and decided to form a Trout Unlimited chapter, figuring that would be the right vehicle to address their concerns. Mm-hmm. And what the people who are part of the chapter, they weren't fishermen. These are ranchers, and it wasn't like they're watching slideshows of fishing or talking about fly tying or where they're going to. These are ranchers on the river, and so I think that in particular the Big Blackfoot chapter of Trout Unlimited, actually on our logo, I mean it's a shovel and a reel and rod. So
I noticed that. I thought that was cool.
It's the idea of doing a lot of dirt work and tributary work, because the idea is that the river is a barometer of the watershed's health. And so it's like looking at this ridge top to ridge top conservation view. It's like if the river's doing well, then everything else is doing well. So how do you address the river? Well, we're going to address the tributaries. And what's up with the tributaries? Well, they've been suffering from logging damage and sedimentation, or ranching and farming, and let's figure out ways that people can make better decisions. And so Trout Unlimited really helped with that. I mean, helped us put in a pivot, so now we're not wasting so much water. We can keep more water in the river. We're not wasting so much water when we irrigate. It helped us pipe really leaky ditches, help other ranchers, just try to think of better ways that they can water and graze and take care of the tributaries, which ultimately then take care of the main stem. And then when I was talking about that kind of like ridge top to ridge top focus, realizing that we were kind of getting bigger than, when I say we, I was hardly even conscious at this time. They were saying that we're getting bigger, and there's things that the mission of Trout Unlimited can't address, like we're going to talk about predators or weeds or development. And so the Blackfoot Challenge kind of was born out of Trout Unlimited, and this idea of having public-private partnerships and to achieve some of these goals and tackle some of these challenges was born. And we're just so lucky, because that idea of collaborative conservation is kind of a tenet here in the Blackfoot Valley. I mean, it's something that's pretty special. I think it's because it's been slow. Folks have been kind of working on this ethic since the 60s. Mm-hmm. 60s, late 60s, early 70s, like the type of landowners that were here, the type of agency representatives that were here, kind of set the tone, if you will, for this collaborative work to happen. And so the Blackfoot Challenge has been super successful, but it's not like this shake and bake model that you can just throw in community. Sure. I mean, it's something that was grown slowly over time, had the right people. And an amazing organization has been able to tackle some really sticky issues. So I feel really fortunate to live in this part of Montana, and a little kind of naive and rose-colored too, because things are good here. But yeah, I remember there was in 2004 or 5. This is before the economy kind of tanked. There was a rancher sold 200-acre part of his ranch, and a developer wanted to put in 119 lots on these 200 acres out in rural Montana. And I was just kind of so shocked that was even that could even be proposed. I didn't understand that could happen. And I remember wondering why the Blackfoot Challenge wasn't going to get involved and stop this. And I was kind of incensed, and, that the challenge wouldn't take a position. And then, I was reminded that the challenge isn't an advocacy organization. It is a forum to bring people to the table and let's talk about issues, and they're not going to take sides. And, but they would, point me in the direction to help me educate myself. And so I went to some workshops with the Sonoran Institute that were hosted by the Sonoran Institute. I mean, I didn't even know what a county commissioner was.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, now I'm going to learn what a county commissioner is and does. And, I should, pay attention to what, subdivision review is. And so it was I learned a lot at that time. And that's how I came to be on the Open Lands Committee. About that time, our county passed a $10 million open space bond. And then I was one of the folks selected to be on the committee to determine how those funds are to be spent on what sort of projects. And so that's been really exciting to learn about my county and the different kind of conservation goals and development issues. That's been eye-opening. And again, and the ranch is a direct benefit of that. Like the very first project for that open space project was put in an easement on 4,000 acres that we lease here on the ranch. So, I mean, it was definitely selfish in my community do-gooderism. It's
no, that's where it starts. I mean, that's why I do what I do, because I don't want people messing up the stuff I like. I mean, it is selfish, but I think it's for the greater good. It's a lot different than the selfish that, would drive you to put 112 homes on a, what was it, 20-acre parcel? What'd you say?
Oh, 119 on 200 acres. Yeah, it was denied. I mean, it was held up as this like an egregious example of crappy subdivision. And so we were able to have these conversations on management and planning. Yet we're still not able to, zone this part of the rural county like that. That's not going to go over very well. But, people are definitely more aware. Because that was just that could even happen. It was incredibly frustrating, but you learn. And so that, and then the economy all fell apart in 2008. So that helped too.
Yeah. That's, personally, it's not about me, but that's when, I came to the conclusion that I wanted to be doing more conservation, because in the lead up to that, pretty much all of my work revolved around working with developers to help them go out, developers or investors to go out and buy ranches, and they'd either, bank it and try to, sell it later, or switch some water rights around, try to make a lot of money, and then sometimes develop it. And then I was in grad school and the whole economy collapsed, and a lot of these so-called developers I've been working with went belly up, and you just saw, first of all, how fake it all was and how they were using money that didn't really exist. And then two, the shit show that they left in their wake and how they screwed things up that probably can't be fixed. And it was that kind of realization and that feeling very bad about myself that led me to want to continue in that world, but being on the side that I could feel good about. So, and I'm not 100% anti-development at all, but it's got to be done responsibly, especially out here. There's just not enough resources otherwise,
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I was just kind of learning all what goes into it. I mean, why would you want to put, this particular development, I think the strategy was just, I'm going to ask for everything and then maybe they'll give me something sort of thing. It was just it could have been. It seemed like a waste of everyone's time, including the developers. Like he had just planned on doing something a little more thoughtful and working with the county. Something probably could have gotten done, but instead it was contentious and ugly, and but a good experience nonetheless.
Yeah, definitely. There's a good book called Collapse by Jared Diamond. He's the guy that wrote Blood or Guns, Germs, and Steel. But one of the chapters is about the Bitterroot Valley south of you, and about how the lack of zoning there led to so many problems. I read it a long time ago. I need to reread it, but that's kind of a good cautionary tale and a good endorsement even for like anti-government people as to the important role government can play in this rural land use stuff, because without them, it's just going to be a complete mess.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that example, I mean, the Bitterroot is definitely held up as like that sort of development process we don't want to go through here. Like somehow, how do you get ahead of it and be thoughtful? And then at the same time, like we're growing here in Missoula County and definitely around Missoula. And how do you grow responsibly? How do you have affordable housing? How do you have a variety of housing available? Man, how do you do it all? Like, I mean, how do you protect important agricultural soils? Yet, I mean, which are all right close to the city, which is where development needs to happen. You know, I mean, I'm glad I'm not a county commissioner.
Well, that was going to be my next question. When are you running for office?
Yeah, no.
Not happening?
And I mean, I'd so much rather be a cheerleader than, oh God, no. I mean, I'm involved with Montana. I mean, I'm chair of the State Board of Montana Conservation Voters, and it's a fantastic organization, getting conservation-minded folks elected and holding them accountable and kind of educating the electorate. But I so admire people running for office. It's a miserable job campaigning, and man, just a really, really tough job once you're in there. So I really admire those folks, but nope, I couldn't do it.
Well, we're at an hour and 3 minutes, which is kind of crazy.
My goodness.
I told you we'd only get to like 10% of the questions. So favorite books. Do you have any favorite books, like a favorite book about the West? And it very well may be like the other question, like you're living it. Why would you read books about it? You read books about something else. But are there any books that come to mind, maybe that you would recommend to other people who want to learn about the West?
Yeah, well, I think Jane Smiley's 1,000 Acres comes to mind, and that was written in 2003, and that wasn't necessarily about the West, because I think the farm was somewhere in the Midwest. But the idea of farming and family and loyalty and all of that kind of Shakespearean stuff.
Yep.
She was able, I mean, this is nonfiction, but it just struck me, and I was like, wow, this is what the ranch is like, man. And then Judy Blunt's Breaking Clean, and she's a Montana writer, and that's pretty powerful. Again, ranch, again, female perspective and living in the West. That struck me. I'm reading Deer Hunting with Jesus right now. That was like 10 years ago, I guess. I can't pronounce his last name. Joe Beget.
I've never even heard of that. I've never heard of that book.
Deer Hunting with Jesus: Dispatches from America's Class Wars.
No, I haven't heard of that.
Check it out.
Okay.
It's an engaging read right now. I'm, I don't know, quarter of the way through it. I don't read much from May to October. So I'm a quarter of the way through it, and I've been trying to read it all summer. So, yeah.
That's understandable.
October, I go look for my husband in the mountains, and then I get to read.
Nice. What's your favorite book of all time?
Oh man, you mentioned it earlier. Guns, Germs, and Steel. That helped me, and then that's Jared Diamond's, and then I met my husband on a 3-day backcountry bow hunting blind date, and because it was a blind date, I decided to make sure I had a good book along in case I didn't like him. And I was reading the Emperor of All Maladies by Siddhartha Mukherjee, the biography of cancer, and that was a fantastic book. So two books that are kind of random and different, but they kind of stick out.
No, those are great. And all the books you've mentioned, with the exception of Jared Diamond, I hadn't heard of any of them. So that's rare, because normally some of these books get repeated, but those are all new. Wait, so with your husband, you just signed up for 3 days with somebody you didn't know?
Yeah, I had my sister-in-law at the time had emailed me out of the blue and said, or his sister-in-law emailed me out of the blue and said that I need to go meet this guy. And she lived up in Alaska, and I used to play lacrosse with her, but I hadn't talked to her in like over 10 years. So I thought it was very strange that she was emailing me, and especially and asking me about my love life. But I played with her. We were friends, but we weren't super tight, so it was just odd. Anyways, I didn't want to be a flake, and I told this guy that I was unavailable, but, until October. And then he said that his priority was sticking an arrow in an elk in October. So, maybe we'd meet. And this conversation kind of went on in May. And then in September, I shot him a line because, I'm not a flake. And I said, like, if you want to do anything, let me know. And he's like, well, come meet me outside of Ennis and let's go hunting. And I'm like, I don't hunt, and I don't even know anything about bow hunting. And I thought he was challenging me because I thought he was saying, like, oh, little girl, can you handle 3 days in the mountains with a stranger? And I was like, of course I can. I have bear spray and a good book. And it's October, and I'm kind of done talking to people by then. So, and it was a mountain range that I hadn't been in, and so I was super psyched to be in the Madisons, whether he was good company or not. So, and he ended up being great company, and yeah, it was great.
That's a cool story. That's very cool.
3 days. You definitely get to know a lot about a person.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's like, you're going to know one way or the other, like real quick. That's a good way to, that's really cool. What is the most powerful outdoor experience you've ever had? And you've had a lot of them, but and it could be funny, scary. I guess meeting your husband on a 3-day hunt is pretty powerful.
I guess that's what kind of sticks in my head, because I've had, horses dying, bad accidents, getting stuck in some snowstorm in the Sierras, and thinking this was like Donner Party stuff, or just kind of done stuff around the ranch. But I think I've never been really injured outside where I've had to be injured and be alone, spending days by myself without food and water. I've never had anything happen to me like that. But yeah, meeting my husband, and those first 3 days, we were with these llamas. I'd never even been around llama. I didn't know they're totally different than a horse. They move different. I don't know anything about hunting. I didn't, don't know anything about. If I spend enough time outside, I just don't. Hunting wasn't something that I definitely support, but I don't participate in because I'm lazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so those 3 days with him was pretty great, and then I was super stoked to see him, and I thought it would be another 6 weeks or so before I saw him, but he's invited me to come out into a different part of the mountain range 2 weeks later, and so I had to hike in and go find him for our second date.
That's cool.
And again, he wouldn't tell me where he was hunting because it's a secret hunting spot, and I had to get to the trailhead and find out where he was going to be, and then hike in, for a day to go look for him, and stepping over some of the largest loaves of bear shit that I've ever seen, and thinking okay. And he ended up getting an elk on that trip. And again, it's rainy and you're tired and a lot of grizzly bear activity and, strange man. And we have different expedition behavior and different ways of handling stock and different ways of, being in bear country. So yeah, all of that came to the surface. And I married him.
That's great.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll say meeting my husband. That's my strongest outdoor experience.
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's hard to top that. If you had to pick one spot that's your favorite location in the West, what would it be?
Man.
Other than your ranch.
Other than the ranch in Montana.
Yeah.
I went to college in Oregon, and so in Portland, Oregon, and so there's something about the air of the Pacific Northwest that I really love. Just the mountains, the ocean, the dunes, the rivers, like there's so much of everything in the Pacific Northwest. So that region means a lot to me. And then same with that northern bit of California and the Eastern Sierra. That's just a pretty stunning. I have a crush on California. It's funny. It's like I feel kind of shy about saying that because I love Montana so much, but I kind of have a crush on California.
No, it's cool. I was there for my birthday last year, and we went like San Francisco and then surfed along the way, all the way down to Big Sur. And man, it is so cool out there. And that's not even the mountains, that's the coast, but it's awesome. And then the Pacific Northwest, I love that. I did a semester at Knowles in college in the Pacific Northwest. And so that's kind of where I really got, developed my love for this area or just for big mountains. And man, it toughens you up in the Pacific Northwest with that weather.
It's so wet.
Oh God, it's just unbelievably wet, and it just doesn't. It won't stop raining. That was I had a big breakthrough there about needing to control my bad attitude. After like day 7 of rain, I was like, all right, this ain't gonna stop, but I can change my bad attitude, so this isn't that bad.
That's a pretty powerful lesson right there.
Yeah, it is. So this is a hard one, but what is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Okay. My dad often says this, and I think he got it from my grandfather. His father-in-law was keep a leg on each side and your mind in the middle. So that I mean, it's a riding reference, but that'd probably be the best. But then, man, the idea of 4 agreements, and I think the 4 agreements is, be impeccable with your word. Don't take anything personally. Don't make assumptions. Always do your best. That's a pretty good one that kind of seems to capture all the advice that's out there.
That is good. I forgot about that. I read that book a long time ago and I've forgotten about it. I need to revisit that.
But then you're right. What you just said about the Pacific Northwest reminds me of Viktor Frankl's, what was that? Between stimulus and response, there's a space, and in that space is our power to choose our response, and in our response lies our growth and our freedom.
Yep.
I mean, that's that. Yeah, maybe I'll go with that one. I don't know.
No, that's a good one, and that's powerful.
That's just attitude.
Yeah, and you think that guy employed that attitude in a damn concentration camp, and I was throwing a little fit in a tent on a 3-month backpacking trip. I mean, yeah, that keeps it all in perspective. I think everybody should read that book. I'll put a link to it on the webpage, but that's mandatory reading as being a human being.
Yeah. Awesome.
And so last big question, if you could make a request of the people listening to this podcast, and it's people like me and you, and who love the American West in one way or the other, and you do all your community work and your Montana conservation voters work, so what would you ask of the people, or what kind of words of wisdom would you give to the people who listen to this?
Well, besides voting for John Tester, but thinking about how to address climate change, like how to talk about it, how to vote to address it. We got to do something. So that's, and I don't even have sexy, pithy words to go with it. And it's not a sexy subject, but we have to figure out a way to talk about it and address it. So.
Yeah, as we record this, my hometown is getting ready to get absolutely destroyed by that hurricane. Yeah, it's I'm probably gonna have to go back. I'm probably gonna go back and help. By the time we release this, it'll be over. But man, what a mess. Well, tell me something. Are you optimistic? Give me something good to finish this up.
I was like, oh, this is such a downer.
No. That you're optimistic. You're upbeat. You're working hard on this stuff. Do you feel good about? With a lot of hard work, I think we'll be able to get things going in the right direction. I wouldn't be doing my work, and I think you think the same thing.
Yeah, and did you get to spend some time with David Brooke at the Aspen Institute when you were there with?
No, I did not.
Ah, okay. Anyway, he was here in Missoula earlier this week, and that was great to hear. Also, but a
David
little
Brooks,
more,
the New York
the
Times
New York
guy.
Times
Yeah, he
columnist.
was
Yeah.
not there. I wish he had been though.
Oh, I thought he had been. I'm sorry.
No,
Okay.
no, he was not there. I would have been. I wouldn't have left his side if he had been.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah. So I'm trying to think of something upbeat, and he really said that we can't think of being saved or making these big changes or addressing the things that we care about from this, like the top down or the national level. That really needs to happen at the community level. So it's super local, and so I think that's where I'll put my focus.
Yeah, I think that's
where,
good.
and that's within all of our abilities. We can all do that. So, yeah, there's my yay rah rah.
I
positive.
agree. I think that's you're a perfect example of what one person can do. And so, keep up the good work. Thanks for taking the time to chat. I really appreciate it.
Back at you. Thank you so much, Ed.
Hey, it's Ed again. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast, and thanks for listening to that particular episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Before you go, I've got 3 quick things. Number 1, if you like the podcast, please do me a huge favor. Either pass it along to a friend who may be interested, share it on your social media, and or go to iTunes and give it a 5-star review. All those things would mean a lot to me, and they would really help to spread the word about the podcast. Number 2, if you've listened to many of these episodes, you know that I love reading and I love talking about books. Every other month, I send out a quick email with a few books that I've recently read and highly recommend. The subjects are varied, but they're pretty much all nonfiction with an emphasis on history, biographies, adventure narratives, and topics related to the American West. There are no sales pitches for ranches, no spam, no other kind of nonsense, just books. So if you'd like to sign up for the list, head to Mountain and Prairie /reading, or just go to Mountain and Prairie and there's a massive tab at the top that says book recommendations. Click on it. There are a ton of good books that I've read. Some of the old email lists are on there. You can go crazy. There are a lot of books. And finally, if you know anyone I should interview for the podcast, please don't hesitate to reach out and let me know. All my contact info is at mountainandprairie.com, and I'm on all the social media stuff, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, blah, blah, blah. So feel free to reach out. I'd love to have some recommendations and suggestions of interesting people I should meet. All right, that's it. Thanks for listening. Talk to you soon.